What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. Today, we'll be talking about the top 10 free agents that are currently not signed for the 2025 NASCAR season. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. While many NASCAR drivers have signed their deals for 2025, there's a lot of big-name drivers that have still not signed either contract extensions or signed for rides for 2025. Today, we're going to talk about 10 of those drivers that have not signed contracts currently at the moment for the 2025 season. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first driver that we'll be talking about today is Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace more than likely is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 23XI Racing, but we continue to wait a long time for that contract to be done. And Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, is probably the number one guy on this list because of the success he's had over the course of the last few years. Bubba Wallace said while he's not won since Kansas in 2022, he was able to make it onto the playoffs on points last year. And you look at the speed that this driver has shown over the course of the last 4 weeks. He finished in the top 10 3 of the last 4 races, and his speed has continued to get better. And he just got a top 5 in the Breaker 400 and picked up a stage win as well. Now, like I said, more than likely, Bubba Wallace is going to sign a multi-year contract extension with 23XI. But what if 23XI Racing decides to not get a third charter? This could be a little more difficult for Bubba, but because of the fact he does have sponsorship and funding, I think more than likely he's going to sign an extension with 23XI Racing. Now, an outside possibility could be a team like Spire, but more than likely Bubba Wallace is going to sign an extension. He's really good friends. He was at the wedding with Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin. So more than likely in the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to be hearing that Bubba Wallace has signed a contract extension with 23XI Racing. But currently, Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, is the number one free agent on the market on the NASCAR Cup Series for 2025. But like I said, I do think he will sign a contract extension with 23XI Racing. The second big free agent we are talking about today is Erik Jones. Now, very similar to Bubba Wallace, Erik Jones is still more than likely expected to return to Legacy Motor Club in 2025. However, he has still not signed a contract extension with Legacy at this particular moment. And there are some organizations that might be looking at him. A big reason why I think he's not signing an extension is he probably wants a multi-year extension. And Legacy Motor Club, they just laid off a ton of employees with the 84 car, and we know the Legacy's been doing some restructural stuff behind the scenes currently at the moment. Erik Jones has been driving a 43 car since 2021 season, when it was still Petty GMS, or at the time was Richard Petty Motorsports. Then in 2022 became Petty GMS, and over the course of the last couple years, it's been Legacy Motor Club. If Legacy Motor Club wanted to be smart, they would keep Erik Jones around. But let's say all of a sudden Erik Jones decides to not sign a contract with Legacy Motor Club. Where could he go? Well, I think there's a few options out there. There is Spire Motorsports. We know Spire Motorsports is looking at getting a big-name driver. Corey LaJoie is not signed for the 2025 season because he just got dropped by the organization very recently. So you have to look at Erik Jones maybe being a candidate and possibility. Now, more than likely, like I said, I do think Erik Jones is going to sign an extension with Legacy Motor Club for the 2025 year. But I do think Erik Jones is a slight possibility to go to a team like Legacy next year. I think to Spire, I should say. I think if Erik Jones doesn't return to Legacy next year, I think he'll go to Spire. But like I said, more than likely, you're going to see Erik Jones return to Legacy Motor Club in 2025 because I really like Erik Jones, and I think Erik's been doing a solid job this year with Legacy Motor Club in the Cup Series. The third big name free agent that we're talking about today is Ryan Preece. Now, Ryan Preece, unlike Erik Jones and Bubba Wallace, he does not have a contract for 2025, and he is looking at his options going into 2025, as he's currently the only SHR driver that is not signed for 2025. Chase Briscoe, of course, going to Joe Gibbs Racing, Noah Gragson going to Front Row, and of course, you do have Josh Berry, who's going to the Wood Brothers. Ryan Preece is the odd man out, and we know he won't be in the 41 for Haas Factory, as Cole Custer will be driving that seat next year. But where could Ryan Preece end up in 2025? If he wants to stay in the Cup Series, he has to look at a team maybe like Colleague Racing, maybe Rickwer Racing. Those could certainly be options for 2025. But I think of Haas Factory in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think if you brought Ryan Preece down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and drive for the Haas factory organization, I really do believe that Ryan Preece could be a really solid driver over there. I think he could win a few races. I think Ryan Preece is not as bad of a driver as some people make him out to be. He can drive a race car. He's got a ton of talent. He can do the best in equipment. If you put him in Xfinity equipment, I think he'll do a very good job. Plus, they're going to need a veteran over there, especially if potential rumors that Degan might be over there next year. They're going to be looking for a veteran driver to go over there next year. I certainly could see him going there in 2025 and really building up that program back up because they're losing Cole Custer and potentially Riley Herbst as well at the end of this year. At least, well, Cole Custer, of course, going Cup. But I think that if you put Ryan Preece behind the wheel of one of these cars, I think he'd do a great job. But Spire Motorsports is another team that I look at because also Ryan Preece does work with KHI, so that could be a good place for him to go. But I do think more than likely Ryan Preece may end up with Haas Factory in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2025 NASCAR season. We'll find out where he goes. The fourth big name free agent we are talking about today is Cory Heim. Cory Heim is one of the top prospects currently in NASCAR's lower divisions. He's already made his Cup Series debut, substituting for Erik Jones, and Erik Jones was injured for a few races, and he did a very solid job in those races. He then, of course, made that one start with 2311 Racing in Nashville about a month and a half ago, and he was very, very successful. He did a really solid job, was actually competing for a top 10 at one point, but unfortunately ended up crashing out. He has been looked at as a potential candidate for a third 2311 racing seat for 2025 because he's the future of 2311 racing. And I do think Cory Heim deserves an opportunity and shot to move up the Cup. We know people are going to talk about Joe Gibbs Racing, why he wouldn't go there, because apparently he had a falling out with JGR, and apparently Ty and Cory really do not like each other, which is a massive reason why we haven't seen Cory drive a Joe Gibbs Racing car ever. If they didn't burn that bridge, I think he'd be driving for Joe Gibbs Racing and Xfinity full-time at the moment. There is also still a really good chance that he could return to the Truck Series next year and drive for Tricon Garage in 2025, but I do think Cory Heim also has a really good chance to move up the Cup. He could also take over the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club if Erik Jones, let's say, decides to leave Legacy at the end of the year. But more than likely going into 2025, he's probably going to stay in the Truck Series full-time while driving part-time for 2311 Racing in the Cup Series next year. I think Cory Heim should absolutely be a great option for 2311. He'd be personally my choice to get behind the wheel of the seat, but I don't know if that is entirely going to be possible. So we'll see what happens, but I think Cory Heim is one of the best young prospects coming up through the ranks, and I think within the next year or two, he will be a full-time Cup driver, and it could happen in the 2025 season. The fifth top free agent we are talking about today is Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, unlike the last two drivers we talk about, Shane Van Gisbergen kind of does have a little bit of a contract set for 2025, but it's not been officially signed at this moment. There is a lot of expectations that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to move up to the Cup Series in 2025 and is going to drive a third Trackhouse Racing car. Trackhouse Racing is expected to buy a third charter from Stewart-Haas Racing. We know Trackhouse has a lot of young talent in their ranks. Connor Zilisch is one of those drivers who's expected to go Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. And they've also got Zane Smith, who we're going to talk about a little later in this episode. Now, I do think most likely you're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen in a Trackhouse seat. But let's say they all of a sudden decide to change and go with Zane Smith. Where could Shane go? Well, maybe he goes to the 7 car next year, drives for Spire. Already mentioned this, but Corey LaJoie is going to be out of the team. And, of course, SVG does have a KHI alliance. I think Rodney Childers and SVG together would work very, very well. And then, of course, you have Kaulig Racing, which he drives for in Xfinity. That could be another option as well. More than likely, like I've already mentioned, I do believe that he is going to be in a Trackhouse Racing car next year. We know Daniel Suarez is going to be in the 99. I think the number they are going to choose for Shane Van Gisbergen is a number 97 for 2025. But like I said, more than likely, you will be seeing Shane Van Gisbergen next year driving a full-time Trackhouse car next season. I think SVG will get in a third Trackhouse Racing car in 2025. If not, he will be Aspire Motorsports or Kaulig Racing in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. The sixth big free agent we are talking about today is Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst is one of the two remaining Stewart-Haas Racing drivers that does not have a ride for 2025. Now, Joe Custer has offered Riley Herbst an opportunity to come back over to the organization next year. However, Riley Herbst stated very recently, including after winning at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he stated that he is looking at all options for all 3 series going into 2025. So what rides and options are out there? Haas Factory is an option for 2025, but like I mentioned, more than likely that ride will not be open for Riley going into next year. Everybody is saying that Riley Herbst more than likely is going to go to a third 2311 racing car in 2025. Now, the reason that is a very big possibility going into next year is because of the funding. Monster Energy and a Terrace Bull Hertz brand really works very closely with the 2311 team recently, and we do know, of course, that they're in conversations to get that third charter going for Riley Herbst to get behind the wheel next season. I think this is where Riley Herbst is most likely going to end up in 2025. I think Riley has kind of earned it, in my honest opinion, even though I still think Cory Heim should be the chosen driver that we go with, especially since he really is the future of 2311. I think that would make a lot more sense. But I think Riley Herbst is also a driver that I would consider to put behind the wheel, especially if you're looking at funding, especially with a charter agreement that is still not signed currently at the moment. We do believe that Riley Herbst most likely is going to get the seat next year, but things have happened crazier, and we could see Riley Herbst go somewhere else, but I do think more than likely you will see Riley Herbst back in the number 67 or whatever number they choose for 2025. The 7th big free agent we are talking about today is Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton is one of the biggest name free agents on the market going into 2025 because he does not have a contract for 2025 at this moment. As I've already mentioned in this episode, Josh Berry will be taking over the 21 car in 2025, meaning that Harrison Burton is looking for a ride going into next year. Now, where could Harrison Burton end up in 2025? Well, there are some cup rides that are still available. Colleague Racing could be an outside option, and you do have Ricker Racing that could be an option as well. And maybe that third front row seat wouldn't be a bad option either. But most realistically, I'm looking at the Xfinity Series if I'm Riley Herbst. Maybe somehow lease Ford to go to Toyota and maybe goes to Joe Gibbs Racing, go back there. That could be an option for next year. I think the Haas factory team would be another option that I'd be looking at if I was Harrison Burton for next season, or maybe AM Racing perhaps, though I don't think they're really going to want a young driver. I think Harrison Burton most likely ends up one of the Haas factory rides, Ricker Racing, or AM Racing next year. I think he will find a seat. He's got sponsorship from Dex Imaging. I don't think that Harrison Burton is really that bad of a driver. I just think he really got rushed up way too quickly. If RFK or Team Penske decided to run an Xfinity program again, I'd put him behind the wheel because I think he could do a really good job if he got the chance to run Xfinity. We'll see where he ends up going in 2025, but Harrison Burton is definitely a driver looking for a seat going into the 2025 NASCAR year. The 8th big free agent we are talking about today is Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes currently drives the number 19 truck for McAnally Hilgeman Racing, and some are starting to believe that he might return to the Truck Series next year with this team. But there's been a lot of chatter about some organizations that Christian Eckes could end up with in 2025. One of those is Front Row Motorsports. A couple weeks ago, it was reported by Bob Pockers that Front Row Motorsports was looking at him as a potential candidate and option to go with because he's been super good in the Truck Series. He's been the best driver outside of Cory Heim this year and has been super consistent throughout 2025. But it seems like they've gone a different direction. Another team that's looked at Christian Eckes is maybe Spire Motorsports, perhaps. Spire Motorsports, like I mentioned, the 7 car is going to be available, but he is also going to be a rookie, so he might not run as well in that car. Plus, he's never made a Cup Series start. And then there's Colleague Racing. There were rumors last year that he could go to Colleague Racing full-time in Xfinity until Josh Williams took the seat. And obviously, of course, there is a potential of RCR being a possibility as well if they do decide to expand to a 3-car operation with RCR. I think Christian Eckes could still, though, end up in trucks, but I think he's ready to make the move up. Whether it's Xfinity or Cup is really to be determined at this particular moment in point. But I do think Christian Eckes may move up to some new series, and I think he's a big free agent to watch for during this silly season. The ninth big name free agent we are talking about today is Zane Smith. Zane Smith currently drives 71 car for Spire Motorsports and is still under contract with Trackhouse Racing. However, we know at this point that Michael McDowell will be driving the 71 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025. And it's currently unknown at this point whether or not we are going to see Zane back at Spire Motorsports altogether or moving on to another organization. And a big question comes with Trackhouse Racing. Now, the easiest thing that they could really do is maybe move Zane Smith into the number 7 car next year and keep McDowell to 71, or maybe swap Rodney Childers over to 71. But I think Zane Smith with Rodney Childers actually would not be a bad move. Zane Smith is starting to figure out this car. He is getting a lot faster. His average finish has improved. His average finish is like a 20.2 or 20.1 over the course of the last 5 or 6 races. And he's had a couple top 5s and top 10s as well. I think that Zane Smith would be a really good option there. There's also Cory Racing. That's another team that Zane Smith is probably looking at for 2025 because he does have a little funding and the Trackhouse connection. And then, of course, there's Front Row Motorsports. Zane Smith was at Front Row Motorsports for a couple years in the Truck Series and made a couple select starts with Front Row Motorsports as well. I think Zane Smith potentially being a candidate to get behind the wheel of one of those other seats would be a really solid option. I think Zane will have a ride next year. I think going to 7 would make a lot of sense if Kyle Busch doesn't become available, but I do think Zane Smith would be a great option for a ride going into 2025. And the 10th and final big free agent we are talking about today is Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan has been on the tips of tons of a lot of people over the course of the last week or so. As we know, she will not be back with AM Racing in 2025. And many people have been wondering, where's Hailie Deegan going to go next year? There are rumors that she could go to Indiana XC in 2025, but I don't know if that's going to be certainly a possibility. What about an organization like Pass Factory? Joe Custer stated recently that they've had talks with Hailie Deegan and they see potential in her. I think this actually is the most likely option for Hailie Deegan going into 2025, which will be her last really great option. And I think there's a big reason also behind this. We know the Xfinity Series is going to the CW in 2025, and I certainly do believe that they're really going to want her to try to grow the sport in a pretty big way. So I think you're going to see Hailie Deegan in the Haas Factory car. She could go to trucks as well, maybe go back to Thor Sport Racing perhaps, but I do think that Hailie Deegan is definitely going to be a candidate for one of those other rides going into next year. So we'll see what happens with Hailie Deegan going to 2025, but I think most likely you're going to see Hailie Deegan in a Haas Factory team car in the 2025 year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I do think Hailie Deegan will have a ride with that team in 2025. So those are the 10 big drivers who I think are free agents. Let's talk about some honorable mentions. Justin Haley. Justin Haley is expected to be back with Rickwell Racing in 2025, but he's been being looked at by other teams. Spire was looking at him at one point, 2311 was looking at him at one point, the Woodburns were looking at him at one point. I think you have to think Justin Haley, with how well he's been running with Rick Ware, I think he's going to be looked at by other organizations. Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch could be a free agent at the end of the year. I know he's technically signed with RCR for next season, but I do think that Kyle Busch could be looked at for other organizations like 2311, as they're going to have a 4th car part-time. Martin Truex Jr., Cory Heim, Carl Evans, Kurt Busch potentially if they want to come back. But Kyle Busch could be a candidate. Josh Williams, another name that probably will be a free agent because of the lack of performance this year. I don't know if he'll have a ride going into 2025. Brandon Jones is on the hot seat currently at the moment with the lack of performance. Yes, he does have the Menards funding and sponsorship, but I do think that Brandon Jones has to be looked at as someone who may not have a ride going into next year. Matt DiBenedetto is another driver who could technically be a candidate in 2025. And Sam Mayer is another driver that I think could also be a free agent, though we do know he'll probably be in a Cup Series ride next year in 2025. So, those are the top 10 free agents currently available for 2025. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Where do you think these drivers end up in 2025? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have 2026 NASCAR silly season predictions. Monday, there's going to be a NASCAR news video on the channel. Tuesday, most likely, we'll have 10 drivers who could join the Haas Factory team in 2025. Wednesday, if there's enough news to cover, we'll have a news video on the channel, and we'll have a lot of great content dropping as we hit you guys through the rest of the off weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.